In 1963, a man in central Turkey knocked down a wall in his basement. Behind it was a tunnel. The tunnel led to another tunnel. That led to a room. The room led to a staircase going down. The staircase led to another level, and another. He had accidentally found a city. Not a ruin, not a collection of foundations. A fully intact underground city carved from volcanic rock, with ventilation shafts, wells, stables, wine cellars, churches, and space for approximately 20,000 people. The city had been there, sealed and silent, for roughly 2,000 years. It had no windows, it had no sunlight, and it had been built not by a lost civilization no one has heard of, but by ordinary people making an extraordinarily rational decision about where to live. The city is called Derinkuyu. It sits beneath the Cappadocia region of central Turkey, and it is not unique. The name itself means deep well in Turkish. The people living above it for centuries knew something was down there. Local folklore described underground chambers. Nobody understood the scale until that basement wall came down. Archaeologists have identified more than 200 underground cities in the same region. 36 of them are large enough to qualify as cities by modern definitions. Derinkuyu is simply the deepest. It descends 18 floors below the surface. Its lowest level sits approximately 85 meters underground. The scale of that engineering, done without power tools, without steel, without modern surveying equipment, is something that still prompts modern engineers to put down their calculations and stare. So who built it, and why did they go underground in the first place? The rock helped make the decision. Cappadocia sits on a vast layer of volcanic tufa, a soft, easily carved stone that hardens when exposed to air. That specific property is almost miraculous for underground construction. You can cut it with hand tools. Once carved and exposed to the atmosphere, it sets like concrete. Walls that began as soft rock become permanent structures over time. The people who first settled the region noticed something else. The tufa stayed cool in summer and warm in winter. It held a stable temperature year-round. An underground city in tufa was not just defensible, it was comfortable. But comfort alone doesn't explain why people carved 18 floors into the earth. The engineering of Derinkuyu tells you the real reason. Every entrance to the city could be sealed from the inside, using massive circular stone doors, some of them weighing up to half a ton. These doors rolled into position across narrow corridors. From the outside, they were immovable. From the inside, a single person could open or close them. That design is not built for weather. That design is not built for cold. That design is built for people who needed to lock out other people. The ventilation shafts were disguised at the surface. The wells were built to be sealed so an invading force could not poison the water supply from above. There were designated areas for livestock so animals could be kept below without exposing anyone to the surface. The corridors themselves were deliberately narrow, wide enough for one person to move through comfortably, not wide enough for two people to walk side by side. An invader who found his way in would have to enter single file. The defenders, positioned at every turn and level, would have an overwhelming advantage. Every single feature of Derinkuyu is a tactical decision. The people who built it were not hiding from the elements. They were hiding from armies. Cappadocia sits at the crossroads of some of the most heavily contested land in human history. The Hittites, the Persians, the Greeks, Alexander the Great, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs, the Mongols, the Ottomans. Every major military power of the ancient and medieval world passed through or fought over this exact stretch of land. For the people who lived there, the threat was not occasional. The threat was permanent. The underground cities were not built in a single event. They were expanded, deepened, and refined across centuries, each generation adding new levels, new tunnels, new defensive features as new threats arrived. Derinkuyu's lowest levels are estimated to date to around 800 BC. Its upper levels were still being modified in the Byzantine period, more than 1,500 years later. This was not a refuge of last resort. For stretches of history, it was simply where people lived. How did they breathe? Derinkuyu has more than 15,000 ventilation shafts. The main shaft descends the full depth of the city, drawing fresh air down and circulating it through the tunnel network. The shafts were engineered so that fresh air reached the lowest levels without requiring mechanical assistance. The system still works. Engineers who have studied it say it performs comparably to modern passive ventilation design. They had light from oil lamps. The niches carved into the walls at regular intervals along every corridor were not decorative. They were lamp holders, spaced precisely for consistent illumination across the entire underground network. Water came from wells drilled through the rock to underground sources, sealed at the top, inaccessible from above. Food was stored in designated cool chambers on the upper levels. Grain, olive oil, wine. The city was provisioned to sustain 20,000 people for months without any surface access. Months. Underground. In the dark. The logistics of that are staggering, even by modern emergency planning standards. There are also schools, or what researchers interpret as schools. Small chambers off the main corridors with carved benches along the walls, sized for children, positioned in quieter sections of the city away from livestock and storage. Life continued underground. It did not simply pause. Derinkuyu is the most studied of the underground cities, but it is not even the most impressive in one specific respect. It is connected. A tunnel system links Derinkuyu to another underground city called Kaimakli, located approximately 9 kilometers away. The tunnel between them is nearly the same length as the cities themselves. Kaimakli is the wider of the two cities at its upper levels, believed to have housed the larger population. Derinkuyu is the deeper. The two functioned as connected nodes in a single underground network, not as separate, independent refuges. Two underground cities, linked by a tunnel long enough to walk for several hours, all of it invisible from the surface. The scale of the project, when you consider the total connected system and not just the individual cities, suggests a level of coordinated long-term planning that most people don't associate with civilizations this old. Why did people eventually leave? The threat environment changed. As regional powers stabilized and organized military protection became more reliable, the need to disappear underground for months at a time faded. The cities were sealed, not destroyed, sealed. Some of them were used into the early 20th century as recently as 1923, when Greek Christian communities in the region were displaced during the population exchanges that followed the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. They didn't leave because the cities stopped working. They left because the world above them finally became safer than the world below. Modern architects and engineers who study Derinkuyu tend to come away with the same reaction. Not wonder at how primitive the builders were. Wonder at how little has changed in the fundamental logic of what they built. Passive ventilation, thermal mass construction, defensive choke points, distributed water supply, sealed food storage. Community infrastructure maintained under sustained siege conditions. Every one of those principles still appears in modern emergency architecture and military fortification design. The people of Cappadocia didn't build underground because they lacked the knowledge to build above it. They built underground because they understood their situation with complete clarity. The surface was dangerous. The rock was cooperative. The math was simple. And 85 meters below a man's basement, the city waited, sealed and intact, for someone to knock down the right wall.